McGuire.
It's a pleasure to follow the honourable gentleman. Can I say that this isn't the first time that this House has called for a cumulative impact assessment on welfare reforms and their impact on disabled people. But this time it's not just disability organisations or even the official opposition calling for it, it's actually over 100,000 people who signed the WOW petition, and like others in this House, I want to encourage and congratulate those people who signed a petition and who made this House bring this particular debate to the floor. And I recognise, as did the Honourable Member for Hayes and Harlington, that this is probably a historic occasion because it is the first time that disabled people have actually framed an agenda in this House, and I hope that, regardless of what our views are, that we can respect that. Can I also say, just initially, to the Minister who will be replying, I recognise, I think that some of the work that he is trying to do with employers, etc., is good work about fulfilling potential. And I think that I will agree that his heart is probably in the right place. I was going to maybe caveat that, but his heart is in the right place. I think the difficulty that we're all having is not with his heart, but is actually with the proposals that have been introduced by a welfare reform that he and his government have proposed. And frankly, Madam Deputy Speaker, it is with some sadness that we are here again, yet again, asking for a cumulative impact assessment, something that the government should have done when it introduced its welfare reform package. Over that period, we frankly have seen a pretty crude campaign of vilification of those in receipt of disability benefits. They have attempted to conflate and those who defraud the system, for which none of us in this House have any truck, a tiny, tiny proportion of the number of claimants. And the Honourable Member for Weavervale fell into the same trap when he talked about fraud and error. There are two different things there. Fraud is completely different from error. But they've conflated the two with those who are attempting to defraud the system and those who are legitimately in receipt of a range of benefits. And this has resulted, as we all know in this House, with such things as an increase in disability hate crime. Sadness also because the Prime Minister gave us a commitment in 2010 when he said, people who are sick, who are vulnerable and who are old, I want you to know that we will always look after you. He even assured us that the cuts would be made in a fair way, asking those on higher incomes to shoulder more of the burden than those on lower incomes. Yet the reality is that disabled citizens lose 9 times more than most others, according to the Centre for Welfare Reform, and those disabled people with higher needs sometimes up to 19 times more than other people. Madam Deputy Speaker, let me say that we on this side of the House are not against welfare reform. Indeed, as many have pointed out this morning, we started it when we were in government. In opposition, we have offered on more than one occasion to work with the government in a consensual way to try and make a way forward. In my conversations with disabled people, I have to say to you, they are not against welfare reform. What they are against is what has happened over the last 3 years. Because the current welfare package fails on various counts. Counter to the Prime Minister's comments about looking after the most vulnerable, the government's welfare package disproportionately affects disabled people, simultaneously hitting them by various changes, as my honourable friend, the member for Aberdeen South, has already pointed out. ESA, universal credit, the bedroom tax, the benefit cap, DLA to PIP, and plus other changes in social provision, as other people have pointed out. Now, I want to turn briefly to PIP, because we were told that PIP would help the most severely disabled people, and if that had been the outcome of the change of policy, then perhaps we could have understood it. But actually what they did is they started with a number and then framed a policy round the number. And the NAO report is devastating this morning, because what it shows is that this government has gone into a reform of the benefit which affects those most disabled in our community and didn't know where it was going or how it was going to implement it. So we've got things like, on the first day they meet their target. Then we get down to claims passed to assessment for provider, not recorded. Then we go to assessments completed. The expectation is it's 42 days, 64 days is actually what they're delivering. But worst of all is the fact that those who are terminally ill, those who have an expectation of life of no more than 6 months, are having to wait 28 days, 1/6. Now the Minister might tell me that it's changed, and I hope that is the case, but 1/6 of their total lifespan is going to be used up in the bureaucratic morass of what is now the PIP assessment. Yes.
I thank my honourable friend for giving way, and she has described already the effects under the Act as it stands. But is she not concerned too that the way in which the Act was cast gives government the scope, without the need for further primary legislation, to make serious changes to the terms and interpretations around exactly these benefits, including PIP, and with the added changes that the Chancellor is promising in relation to annually managed expenditure, mean that precisely that thing of fixing a number and squeezing people off benefit to reach it is more of what we will get in the future?
Yes, and I couldn't agree more with my honourable friend, and I'm delighted that he's made his point. Now, the Minister got quite agitated there, and I hope he's going to give us some facts and figures about what the current situation is in regards to the implementation of PIP, because frankly there has been a wall of silence of what has happened. We all know what's happening in our constituencies, and we are accused of raising anecdotal evidence. Well, the reality is he's in a position to give us the real evidence. Madam Deputy Speaker, since 2010, it obviously didn't matter what was said to the Secretary of State about his welfare reforms. He's become a victim of his own rhetoric and obsessed by his legacy. We used to have beneficiaries in the social security system. Now many people feel that they are victims of the social security system. I asked the Secretary of State to put his cumulative impact assessment where his reforms are. Do the assessment, prove me, prove others, prove 100,000 people out there totally wrong if you have the courage. And I can say this quite categorically: if he won't do it, if he can't do it, then we are entitled to ask, why is he still in his job?
Guto Bebb.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. It is a pleasure to follow the Honourable Lady for Stirling, and indeed may I also pay tribute to the Honourable Member for Hayes and Harlington for securing this debate, and obviously for representing the petition of 104,000 people. I think it is important just at the outset to point out that the National Audit Office report this morning on the implementation of PIP is a disappointment, but I think it should be stated that the report is talking about the implementation rather than the policy aims, and I think that is an important point. It is not a criticism of the policy aim, and the report does make it very clear that it is far too early to indicate any view as to the implication of the policy change that is being implemented with PIP. But I think the issue on this debate has been framed in the context of the changes to the welfare states being undertaken as a response to the need for austerity. I would argue that it is far more important than that. I would say that it is very important that this issue is dealt with, not because of austerity, but despite austerity, because we had a failing welfare system. And I think at any